Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope everyone was able to have a happy and hopefully healthy holiday season. My name is Allison Schnitzer. I am one of the co-executive directors here at the Montgomery County Food Council. I am joined by several members of our staff. If everybody on staff wants to wave, also have members of our council and our board here as well. If those people want to give a little wave as well. Appreciate having everybody here. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Food Council's monthly food systems advocacy call. We typically hold this the third week of each month, but we're hosting it now because next week marks the start of the Maryland General Assembly's legislative session. The session officially kicks off next Wednesday, and it moves very quickly. Lawmakers have just 90 days to introduce, debate, and pass legislation, including the state's overall budget. So during this time, advocacy from all of us, from constituents, plays a crucial role in shaping the outcomes of the bills that wind up being passed. And today's meeting is really going to serve as a preview of the upcoming legislative session. And first up, it is my pleasure to introduce Delegate Lorig Charkoudian, who is joining us today from her car. Really appreciate it. She represents District 20 and where she serves as the vice chair of the Economic Matters Committee and serves as the chair of the Unemployment Insurance Subcommittee. She also serves as the House Chair of the Transit Caucus and the Joint Committee on Personnel Oversight, and serves as the House appointee to the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. Lorig has led on legislation promoting climate justice, consumer protections, sustainable food systems, criminal justice reform, pedestrian safety, and an economy that works for everyone. In addition to her role as delegate, Lorig is the executive director of the Community Mediation Maryland. Lorig received her PhD in economics from Johns Hopkins University. She lives in Tacoma Park, and if all of that wasn't enough, she also runs ultra marathons. So, Delegate, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everyone who's on this call. I really appreciate it. If you weren't on earlier, I just for the record, I'm not driving. I am stopped. It is the period leading up to session where it always seems like, oh, we got plenty of time, and then the reality hits, and I have many bills, and I'm super excited about all of them. And there's a lot of other really good bills coming. And I'll just say, sort of to put this into context, I want to say a couple things. One is this is a period of time where the um, insane cruelty coming from the federal government is, causing just unimaginable harm in our community. And I know everyone here knows that. Um, but what that means is that, our hearts break, but our determination stays strong. And it's this period of time where we just have to double down on our commitment to getting policy right at the state and local level. And so I know most of you, if you're involved with the Food Council at the local level, you know this and you're already involved, but I really want to reinforce how important this kind of advocacy is. And advocacy as well as creativity. I think that the reality is there's just we don't have the kind of money at the state and local level to replace the federal money. The need that's created by the federal layoffs and the impacts in our community, both on those individuals and then sort of the multiplier effect of people having less money and the economic downturn that we may see as a result of that. Um, and then the impact on other people in the community, even if they weren't federal workers. I think there isn't, we are going to work really hard, and I will be fighting. And I know at the county level, folks are fighting to fill the gaps as much as we possibly can. But we're talking about filling gaps in healthcare, and we're talking about filling gaps in food security, and we're talking about filling gaps in, agricultural supports, and we're talking about filling gaps in, grant programs. And so it just is not likely, it's unrealistic that we would find all of that money to fill the gaps that the federal programs filled. And so while on the one hand we need to be advocating for the money that we can get to fill those gaps, we also really need to continue working on creative solutions and finding new and different ways to respond to the challenges that are in front of us. And I think you'll get to see that this legislative session. I think a lot of my colleagues are getting ready with really creative ideas about how do we respond in these moments. And so part of that also is your role. And one of the things I love about state government is how accessible it is, how you if you know, and I think many of you have been advocating, but I think some folks are new. So I'll just quickly say this if it's not sort of on your radar, that you literally can just walk into the office of your state legislator. You can catch them walking down the hall or walking into session. You can probably catch them in the next couple of weeks doing legislative previews in your community. And so, if folks aren't already doing that, I strongly encourage that whoever your legislator is, that you get to know them, that you connect with them in, the legislative breakfast preview or whatever they might be doing in the community, and that you get yourself to Annapolis at some point to have conversations with them. Um, and it's worth doing even in addition to the advocacy on a specific bill. I will say, while I'm talking about catching people in the community, that District 20, which is Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Hillendale, and White Oak, is having our District 20 Breakfast Club legislative preview on Sunday at 11 at El Golfo Restaurant. So if you're in our district, even if you're not in our district, you're welcome to come and hear the preview from the four of us. Okay, so that's sort of his big picture, why we need to be doing advocacy, and how to do advocacy, and how accessible and easy advocacy is. I want to shift to talking about a couple of bills. The first is, in case you missed it, we just overrode the veto of my bill, which is the bill that really sets up a relationship between the Maryland State Department of Education and the Department of General Services. DGS does a lot of sort of statewide procurement and what's called being sort of a control agency, creating these statewide contracts that then others can buy off of. And so my bill last year built this relationship so that MSDE could develop these local contracts and local school systems could buy off of them. And the other thing that my bill did is it increased the ability of local school systems as well as any state agency to have a price preference of up to 10% for local. So it was 5% before that. And so it sort of has moved some structural barriers out of the way, and really, to support MSDE to be able to support local school systems to procure more local food. So many of you advocated for that last year. Thank you. It passed, and then it was vetoed, and then we just overrode the veto. So now it'll get implemented over the next several months. So that's exciting. The second thing that I did want to highlight also before I get into legislation in the upcoming session is that you all may know that I have worked very hard on the bill that really shifted the way that we do procurement to support state institutions to move towards procurement of 20% Maryland farm and fish, invasive species in Maryland farms. And we passed the bill a number of years ago. Some of you were involved in that, and thank you for that. The advocacy continues in the regulatory and implementation phase because at the time, Governor Hogan had vetoed the bill. We overrode the veto, but then the agencies under Hogan really continued to kind of slow walk it. And so we've really worked over the last few years to move the needle on that. And we do have a Department of General Services and Department of Ag who are working hard to move that towards implementation. And I'm talking to more and more farmers who are getting access to that. And so that is exciting, although slower than I'd like, but nothing ever happens as fast as I'd like it to happen. So those are sort of progress on issues that we have worked on together. Two of the bills that I have coming up that I wanted to share with you is one of them is also local food procurement. This is a local bill. So that means it goes through the Montgomery County delegation first, and then it goes through the rest of the state legislature. And it requires the Montgomery County Public Schools to make public on their website the dollar amount of local food that they procure. Local specifically meaning Maryland, so certified farm and fish. So that means stuff that's in like 250 miles away in North Carolina wouldn't count towards this. So they have to publicize the amount that they're procuring right now and keep that current on their website, and then also create a plan to increase that amount over the next 5 years. They have to set goals, and it has to be a inclusive process that the community can participate in with them to move towards increasing those numbers. So that bill had a hearing at the Montgomery County delegation. The next step is for the Montgomery County delegation to vote it out, and then it'll go to the full General Assembly. So that's a bill where reaching out to your delegates and senators in Montgomery County and sharing how important that is to you can be very helpful, because it is, while it has to get through the entire body of the General Assembly, really, if it gets through the county delegation, it'll sort of fly through the rest of it. The second bill that I want to highlight is the Food, Forest, and Foraging Bill. And so this bill creates a foraging permit on DNR state lands. Right now, the foraging is technically illegal. It is illegal. I mean, people do it, but it is illegal on state lands. And, so this bill is sort of mirroring the way hunting permits work, where there's seasons and you can't just take anything, and there's education involved, so people learn about what they're gathering, and there's management of species, so it's not over harvesting. So it sort of really mirrors the hunting license process and creates a foraging license. And so that by itself is exciting, but the money that's generated from the foraging license goes into a special fund, and that fund is used to plant food forests on state land more generally. So not just on DNR land. So that means it could be on university campuses, it could be on hospitals, it could be on prisons. Any state land could be eligible for the food forest. So that bill, we had it last year. It did not move. We are hoping we get it moved this year. Welcome any advocacy. I actually just recently created a podcast explaining it, interviewing someone who's involved with the Montgomery County Food Forest and talking about the bill, and hopefully that education will help people get excited about it. If anyone hasn't heard the podcast yet, reach out to my office and we'll send you the link. So there's all kinds of really important bills that are coming in. I'm not going to try to list them all. I think you probably have a list of all of the other really important food security and food system bills. And so you'll be sharing that with folks, but I wanted to leave time for questions. If folks have questions about any of the stuff that I have talked about, or anything about advocating in the General Assembly, I'm happy to take those questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mary, I see your question about the numbers for those bills. We'll get those if they have
My
numbers.
bills they don't have numbers yet. Well, there's a Montgomery County, actually the food system, sorry, the local bill has the number. I don't know what it is, but
Okay.
the foraging bill doesn't have a number yet. But yes, you'll get those.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions for the delegate? I was looking at I saw your email that you're introducing 17 bills this session, so I was looking at some of the other ones, and I think one that would be interesting to the group is the one around data protection. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that one.
Sure, yeah. So this one is, as folks know, the federal government, in particular, Homeland Security and ICE, have sort of been using every angle they can to go after our neighbors and community members. And so the one of the aspects is really trying to use driver's license information, or trying to get at Medicaid or SNAP or any other kind of data that the state might have. So a number of years ago, we put into place a bill to protect driver's license information, but there seems to be a loophole that we're trying to close with this bill. And then this bill also uh, kind of puts in additional protections for any state data that the state has on members, sorry, on residents, to protect their data. And it gets a little tricky because there's third-party data brokers that get involved in this, and so that's a big piece of what it is that we have to add regulations for. It's not just as simple as directing the agencies themselves not to share the data. And so really that's what the bill does. And the idea is to protect to make it, to protect the private information of residents. And that's really important for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's important to protect people from being harassed, attacked, kidnapped by ICE, but it's also really important just from the perspective of trust. So community members, trusting state agencies and engaging with the state. Um, and that could be trusting, that involves certainly people who are undocumented themselves, but also people who are in mixed status households, or even people who are not citizens but have legal status. But as we know, ICE is sort of going after anyone in racial profiling. And so just it becomes really important for people to be able to, one, to protect people, but also to make sure people continue to access services that they're eligible for, and that they're not afraid to access those services because their data would be in databases that would be accessible by ICE.
No, thank you for clarifying that. I think you know a lot of us help residents connect with SNAP benefits, and that's a big concern. I know the stance of the state has been to not provide that data, and there was a recent comment, I think in December, the USDA secretary sort of threatening to withhold funding from states that didn't provide the data. Is there any update on any sort of state plan? Are we still holding the line in terms of not providing the data?
Yeah, and I think to clarify, yes, we are holding the line, and the issue really is not that the state was ever going to hand it over, and the state will sue before we hand it over, and all of that. It really is these third party data brokers that have access to. It sort of is. It's a little bit convoluted how they have access to the information, um, but that's really where the legislative process gets tricky because, for example, just to let you know how complex the issue is, Zillow is a third party data broker who has access to SDAT information, and that's how you have access to Zillow, right? And so one version of just shutting it all down would mean we would also be shutting down Zillow, right? And so you're really trying to figure out how do you navigate which data people don't have access to, which data brokers can't access, can't share, can't. So that's what makes it a little more complicated than just saying to DHS, like, don't share snap data. Like that feels pretty straightforward, and right now they're not. So it's not that we're putting the bill in because they are sharing it proactively, but because of these third party actors, that's where you need sort of a somewhat more nuanced legislation to make sure you're not inadvertently sharing it.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I'm seeing in the chat there's some questions, and I see Tom's question, wondering what was the governor's reason for vetoing the procurement bill that was just overrode?
I try hard not to speak for the governor when he vetoes my bills. um the comment that was on the what was written in the veto letter was something like, well, we just lost all the federal funding that was supporting this farm to school because we had a good deal of funding that was supporting farm to school. We just lost all that federal funding, so we can't do this anymore. In my mind, that reflected a lack of understanding of what the bill actually did, because the bill was not dependent on the federal funding. The fiscal note of the bill itself was $50,000 a year, so it was a staffing sort of $50,000 a year. So it wasn't that the bill cost too much. I think I that's all I can say about it. I honestly
Yeah,
can't understand it, but that's what the veto letter said.
yeah, that's good. I appreciate the context. I also see a question from Kelly Hudson. Kelly, I don't know if you're here, if you want to come off mute and ask. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, happy Wellness Wednesday. My question is around a racial equity impact assessment, given the history of Black codes, trespassing, gaming laws. I'm wondering, will there be some sort of assessment for this?
Sorry, an assessment for, I'm not, what are
So
you talking about, one of the bills?
yeah, so this is for the
Uh-huh.
foraging bill. So the question is there a racial equity impact assessment for the permitting proposal, given the history of Black codes, trespassing laws, gaming laws, et cetera, that typically criminalized Black and Indigenous folks? from these sort of subsistence practices?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's the Department of Natural Resources will actually write the regs for how, how the permitting for foraging will happen. And I've talked to them a little bit about this, in particular in conversations about indigenous land, um, or historically indigenous land that may now be sort of a state park. And they are in the process of developing a broader kind of equity policy around access to land, that would then sort of overlay onto the foraging permit. And so I actually, so I would encourage you to, if you're interested in that question more broadly, I think it is worth engaging with the Department of Natural Resources, because I think they're having that broader conversation that'll affect not just foraging permits, but other other types of permitting and access. And so I think that's worth just sort of staying engaged in. More specifically, the bill itself has a requirement from an income perspective that there be, with a hunting permit, for example, if you receive SNAP benefits, then you don't have to pay for your hunting permit. So there's like an income based, similar sort of a income-based permit, sliding scale, essentially, SNAPs recipients would get a free permit for foraging.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you for the insight.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the question. It's really important stuff.
Yeah, and I see AK, you have a question also in the chat. I don't know if you would like to come off chat and off mute and ask. Oh, I see your lips moving, but I don't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear
There you
me now?
go. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's a tangential question on the foraging permit. I was wondering if there's any uh, plans around forest composting as well, just to, ensure nutritional return to that, to prevent sort of over foraging. I know forest composting can help speed up that decomposition process that happens naturally in the forest. And community composting, I think, provides 3 times more jobs, 6 times more jobs than landfills. Primarily employs Black, Latino, and queer minority community members. So just wondering if there's a way to, uh, pair in this social and environmental sustainability component to that.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you know that I've had a number of compost bills over the years, so I'm 100% with you on all of those levels. Um, a lot of the details of the permit, as I was is going to be done through the regulatory process, like just so, similar to the hunting permit, which, has guidelines in statute, and then the regulatory process really has the details in the, sort of regulations and policies at the DNR level. So I think those are great questions, and I think because I've talked a lot to them about it, so it's not that I don't know anything about how they're going to go through it, um, but I also, it's sort of a balancing act of like what guidelines I put into statute, and then what you really want people who have expertise on species management and over foraging, like all those things. Like you wouldn't want me to try to write that into law. And so I think, but and in any regulatory process, there's comment periods and so on. And so I really do hope, if folks who are interested in this question about like how do we make foraging equitable, sustainable, accessible, I think it's a super important conversation to be having. That's why I'm putting the bill in, and I really do hope that you know everyone on this call who's interested gets engaged after the bill's passed as the regulations are being built.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anyone else have a question? Yeah, Lorian.
Yeah, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you so much, Delegate Charkoudian, for all of your efforts, related to food. And we're just so lucky to have you in the Maryland State General Assembly. I guess my question related to the local food procurement bill. I was very happy to, testify recently at the Montgomery County delegations hearing, and really excited about all the things that are afoot. And I just wondered about the reporting back. I know we've always said that with the local food procurement bill, there, state agencies who can't meet the purchasing requirement will report back, sort of their reasons for doing so. And one of the good parts about all this is that we'll uncover some barriers, and have some sort of data sharing. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the process for sort of gathering the data and then sharing it back, and if that will be made public and under what time frame.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thanks for testifying on that bill. And just for sort of context for others, the way that the state local food requirement procurement was designed was, we said, okay, the goal is 20%, but we're not saying you have to meet 20%. We're saying you have to keep working until you meet 20%. And the intent was to force a conversation between the procurement entities, their contractors, subcontractors, and local farmers. Because what would happen is, and this isn't just to pick on Aramark and Cisco, but I'm going to give them as an example. Airmark might get a contract, and then they would put out their subcontract for distribution. And in their RFP, they would require that any subcontractor have a national and international supply chain, right? And so by definition, Cisco could get that contract and never talk to a Maryland farmer, never engage with a Maryland farmer, never find out if their product is eligible, would meet the needs, is too expensive, is not too expensive. And so the idea behind creating this requirement was to sort of force that basically Cisco couldn't get that contract unless they had relationships with Maryland farmers. That didn't mean they had to buy from them all, but they had to sort of give a shot to these contracts to Maryland farmers. And so that sort of is the design of the procurement. And then individual agencies would have to annually submit reports to the Department of Agriculture that show what they procured locally. So you could see, we got these eggs from Albright Farms, and this is how much it was. And it was like 1% of all of our purchases, or 0.05% of all our purchases, whatever. And then if they didn't hit 20%, which none of them do, they're supposed to file a waiver with the Department of Board of Public Works, explaining why they couldn't. And so that was supposed to be the place. This is what Lorraine is referencing. Where that was supposed to be the place where we were going to get really useful information about, it is a price issue, right? Because everyone assumes it's a price issue. We don't actually know that because we've never seen, because the farmers can't get into the contracts, right? So we would be able to see, oh, it's a price issue. Oh, it's an aggregation issue. Oh, it's a size of the apples issue, right? They can't, the farm can't get all the same apple size, right? That's the issue. The idea being, once we could see that, then we could continue to refine our policy or our programs or our technical support. And I will say that, when I was saying the Hogan administration, they vetoed it and then they slow walked it. And so really, it's only been like 3 years that we've sort of started to get this off the ground in this new administration, new-ish, a couple years old. And so while we've moved to the point that we finally have the reports from the agencies, right, where we're seeing it's Albright Farms eggs and it's so and so's apples, and we're seeing waiver letters, right, that comply with the letter of the law, like we filed a waiver letter, but we're not seeing good data in that yet. And so that's an area where, when I was saying this iterative work that I'm doing with the Department of General Services and Department of Ag, that's an area where I'm really trying to push folks, because essentially they're in violation of the law. As it turns out, if you're civilly in violation of the law as a state agency, unless someone sues you, it's just like nothing happens. Not that I'm not suggesting you should go sue them, but so that's really where, my pressure as a legislator, others' pressure on these state agencies, I think, to essentially just follow the law, but really to get those letters so that we can get that data. So at this point, it's a very long answer, but just so everyone understood the context, at this point we don't have good data from that that part of the legislation, and I am pushing hard, for the implementation of it.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Lorian. We have time for maybe one more question for the delegate. Well, if not, we'll let
All right.
the delegate get on her way. Thank you so much for pulling over
Thank
and
you. Yeah, of
joining us
course.
today.
Happy to do it. Thank you all for all your good work and hope to see you in Annapolis.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right.
Bye-bye.
We're gonna transition here to our friends at Maryland Hunger Solutions, kind of take a broader look at the legislative session as a whole, the state's budget picture, and just a wider look at all of the food system related bills and bills that impact residents with low income. So very happy today to have LaMonika Jones and Julia Gross here from Maryland Hunger Solutions. I don't know if either of you need screen sharing, but let me know if you do and I can, okay, yeah. Well, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, I'll just start off really quickly and then I'll let Julia take over for our child nutrition. So, Happy New Year, everyone. I hope everyone had a restful holiday season. And so we are kicking into high gear, anticipating this legislative session this year. There's a lot that's happened last year, and I think there's even more that we're dealing with from last year and on into the 2026 season. And I think, Delegate Charkoudian did a great job of kind of explaining what we're looking at when we're thinking about our state budget in terms of making up for a lot of the cuts that happened in 25, a lot of the cuts that are probably still to come, and a lot of the impacts that the state is going to experience, knowing that most importantly, no state, not just Maryland, but no state will be able to make up for the loss of funding at the federal level. And we saw that majorly with the loss of the LFPA and the LFS funding, as well as GusNet funding, and just how greatly the cuts to those programs affect us at the state level. But there's no way, the states are not designed to do that. When we were in the middle of the shutdown and we had the uh, loss of our SNAP benefits temporarily, the message was communicated by the governor, by us as well, that, there is funding at the federal level that states are relying on, and states don't balance their budgets at the beginning of the year with the thought that I will have to consider funding at the federal level as part of my budget. That's not how our governments work. That's not how our budgets work, and it's impossible to expect a state to take up for the funding at the federal level. However, with that said, we still have a responsibility to do to make sure that we're taking care of all of our Maryland residents. And so the big thing that we are focusing on, we do have a couple bills that we are watching, and Julia will go into detail with those. But what we are really watching more importantly is to make sure that while we know we have to have a balanced budget, but to make sure that we are not feeling the effects of these cuts to our human services programs. We are gearing up for changes to the administrative cost sharing this year, as well as next fiscal year, the benefit cost sharing uh, that will take effect, and that will mean that there'll be an increased dollar amount that the state will have to cover as a result of that. And so I can't do my job without mentioning at the federal level, our national team is advocating for a 2-year pause to those cost sharing. And so those are some things that they're working on. There's a couple briefings that are happening this week and next week to hopefully get Congress to put a pause on that, realizing that states need more time to improve their payment error rates, and to have this overhaul is really quickly. But while we work on that, we have to focus on what we can control, which is at the state level, and that is making sure that our residents, our clients for all of our benefit programs are supported, and that there are no cuts to our critical human needs programs that will impact our low income, our food insecure, our most vulnerable residents. So a big part of our focus in early conversations that we've had with Senator Gazzoni with Senator McCray, with Delegate Shetty have been, as well as Delegate Charkoudian, have been making sure that we are protecting our residents and that we are ensuring that there will be no cuts. Um, a lot of the questions we have, a lot of the answers to our questions have been, we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. They're concerned just as much as we are, but our place as advocates is to make sure that we reiterate that we cannot have a cut to any of our human services programs, or those that indirectly impact our residents. And so, that includes, looking at our SNAP retailers, looking at our WIC retailers. How is it that we can support our farmers markets, our other small businesses, childcare centers, daycare homes, that are those that are not food-based businesses, but are those indirect or offer wraparound supports to our community members. So making sure that at the county level, that our state agencies, that they understand that we can't have any of the budget cuts that would threaten the livelihood and the well-being of our residents. So that's the main thing that we are focusing on. The state, and we talked to Delegate Shetty and to Senator McCray earlier this year. One of the biggest questions that I had was knowing that we have the administrative cost sharing coming up and the state is in a deficit. Does that mean that there will be a potential that the older adult SNAP supplement would be cut? And both of them shared that that's not in any of their plans, that they are doing everything that they can to protect that. That hasn't come up. But they are doing everything that they can to make sure that that does not happen. Senator McCray reassured us that he had been spending a lot of time with oversight for DHS and for Department of Health, making sure that all their ducks were in a row, for lack of better words. And so there's a lot of oversight, knowing that a lot of these changes that are coming down are held within DHS, but he has let us know that he was doing a lot of the work to make sure that none of those programs would be impacted, which is a plus for us. But in addition to keeping our eye out for the older adult supplement, we are also being mindful to make sure that there is funding for our reimbursement for EBT theft. That is still one that is on our radar, and the state. We now know that our cards will be chipped as of, I believe it's July this year, our cards will be chipped, which was a major, major move. And Maryland is, I believe, the first state to have, outside of California, to have our cards chipped. And so really, really excited for that, but to make sure that the funding is still there so that in the event that we do have an uptick, I think we've heard from some other advocates in other states that they have seen an increase in EBT theft just these first 7 days of the new year. And so being mindful of that, but making sure that our legislature ensures that the funding is there to support to replace those benefits that are stolen from our SNAP clients. In addition to that, we talked to Delegate Davis right before the holiday season, maybe a little bit after Thanksgiving. We are concerned with the Hunger Free Campus Grant. We know that the dollar amount that Al is allocated is nowhere near enough to support campus hunger. And we know that campus hunger is major. It is important. It's often one that folks forget about. And thinking, the assumption that, you're in college, you're self-sufficient, you can take care of yourself, but it's oftentimes those other things that come into play with a college student, and not just a college student. We don't want to forget the staff that are on campuses as well, because many of them are food insecure as well. But for our campuses that are receiving the Hunger Free Campus Grant, a lot of work goes into making sure that our students are able to utilize their pantries or their programs and initiatives that they put into place. Unfortunately, there is not there when we talked to Delegate Davis, there wasn't much of a move in terms of increasing that, and a lot of that has to do specifically with the state's budget. And so, we're working with Delegate Solomon as well as MHEC on ways that that won't require legislative action, but will make it easier to identify on a college campus or university if a student is experiencing a hardship, food insecurity, ways that we can utilize already reported data such as FAFSA data to ensure that they are able to be eligible for SNAP and other programs. So kind of a workaround to the current requirements in place. There's been no movement on, the work requirement, provisional work study requirement that's in place for college students. There hasn't been any movement on that. There was I think at the federal level, Bonamici introduced a bill last year, but everything, of course, the House of Cards fell down. So everything changed last year. Outside of that, just broader food systems issues that we're looking at. Again, nothing extremely new, but it really is trying to see, and this is something that I'm a big fan of, what's not generating, for lack of better words, what's not generating the support that we thought it would. And so where is it that we can move money around? We know our legislators are really good at finding money in the couch cushions. And we want to find out what's not yielding the ROI that we thought, and where is it that we can move money around. And I think in this legislative session, with an even tighter budget and a tighter budget for the next couple of years, dare I say the next 3 years, 3.5 years, it really is going to be determining how is it that we can move money around, find money in the couch cushions to maintain support for our critical areas, for our residents across the state. And so, in doing so, finding out, how is it that we can use that money to support community and schools. We've been having conversations with MSDE to find out, how is it that we can support nutrition education, knowing that it was a vital resource, and without SNAP Ed, how can we ensure that we are able to continue to have discussions on nutrition education and embed that work into our schools and into other areas, as well as how can we support our SNAP and WIC retailers. We've had conversations with Marilyn Wick on previous bills that have been introduced many, many years ago. But, knowing that new funding opportunities are not kind of the bright shining star and the greatest possibility going into this legislative session, what is it that we can do to support our retailers on the end of that? So it's really is a lot of being innovative with our spending and to find out where we can move money around. We did hear from Delegate Shetty. I don't want to jump on Julia's toes. I'll let Julia talk about the healthy school meals and all that. So I won't go into that. I'll let Julia talk about that. But it really is just going to be, focusing on making sure that everyone has balanced budgets and that, we are maintaining and where we can find the money to increase support in areas, that's where we are going to make sure that we lend our support to. So with that, I will pause.
Yeah, I do see a quick question in the chat, and I also had a question, but it looked like Eric's asking if campuses are looking at getting matching corporate support for food insecurity.
I will have to check. I don't know if any campuses have communicated with us. Brielle oversees quite a bit of our campus hunger work. I haven't heard of any schools that have specifically let us know that they have received corporate funding. So that's a question that we'd have to look into, and then we can provide an answer to.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I just had a clarifying question around the 2-year pause for cost sharing. That's for the actual SNAP benefit itself, right? Not for the administrative cost increase. Um, like there's nothing to prevent that administrative cost share increase from happening later this year.
That's what the 2 year. I'll get the exact language on it. I don't think we have the exact language on what that 2 year pause is, but that 2 year, it's not for the benefit, it's for the actual, I believe it's for the administrative cost share.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
that would be
believe it
great.
is for the administrative cost share because it's tied to, we're looking at, I know this is not Maryland specific update, but our next big deadline is January 30th.
Yes.
And so it is closely connected to our January 30th deadline that we have as well. But I'll get the specific language on it. And then I will actually, while Julia's sharing, I will get the language on it and then I'll let you know.
Awesome. Thank you, LaMonika. Okay. Yes, Julia, thank you. Turning it over to you now.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Julia Gross with Maryland Hunger Solutions. I lead our child nutrition work, and I just wanted to give a plug for our continued work on healthy school meals for all. We do help lead the coalition for the state, and this is a movement that has been going on for a number of years now, so I'm sure a lot of you have heard me speak about it before in this group. I'll try not to repeat myself too much. But for the past several years, we've been asking this state to provide funding to pay for school breakfast and school lunch for all students across the state, regardless of their income or their family's economic status. Um, we have had multiple iterations of bills and asks throughout the years, starting with a full school meals for all, a completely universal meals bill to cover all of the students across Maryland. As LaMonika alluded to, the state budget is not in a great place for massive investments right now. And for the past couple of years, and potentially for the next couple of years. So we have adjusted our ask a little bit. Um, Last year, we put in a bill with our sponsors, who are our continuous, lovely, wonderful sponsors, Delegate Palakovich Carr and Senator Gazzoni. Um, and the bill that was put in last year was an ask for a small pot of money, 10 million, which is small considering the total cost of universal meals, but a small pot of money to supplement and support the implementation of the community eligibility provision. So for those who might be a little bit new to CEP, the community eligibility provision, this is an existing federal provision that allows schools, based on their poverty rates, to implement a universal meals program, and it changes the formula with which they're reimbursed. So this is used in Montgomery County. It has been used consistently for the past 3 or 4 years now, I think, to cover around 60 schools. It's also the same provision that Baltimore City uses. Baltimore County, a number of other districts use this provision to do universal meals across their entire district. Um, so this pot of money would go to helping schools implement CEP. So potentially, hopefully, providing a way for schools that would otherwise not have the financial sustainability to make this provision work, allowing them to make it work. And then as also LaMonika said, the cuts to SNAP are kind of having a broad sweeping impact across a lot of different programs. We are also concerned with those cuts that the SNAP, the way it's going to trickle down into the child nutrition programs, the cuts to SNAP will eventually impact the number of students that are directly certified for free meals. This is getting into the weeds a little bit, but that number, that direct certification number, is the basis for how schools become eligible for CEP. So we are concerned that down the line, we are potentially going to schools are going to either lose their eligibility, or it's going to impact the way they get reimbursed at the federal level. So getting this funding from the state would also be a really great security measure to help maintain CEP levels across the state if we start seeing those numbers drop, if and when we start seeing those numbers drop. So this year we are putting in the same bill with our same sponsors. Delegate Palakovich, Carr, and Senator Gazzoni have agreed to once again introduce this bill asking for $10 million to support the implementation of CEP. I think I can put in the language from last year. There's no bill number this year yet, but I think the only changes are going to be some additional reporting requirements to kind of help build the case for healthy school meals for all in the future. Um, so asking districts to report on the number of CEP schools they're not opting into CEP, kind of highlighting the case for additional funding that's needed, because those schools are generally not opted into CEP because it's not financially sustainable. So making the case for the need for increased funding, and then another reporting ask around school meal debt levels at the end of each school year. So again, highlighting the fees that are not being able to be paid by families, and where that funding is coming from. It's getting pulled from a lot of other very important places around education funding, and those funds need to go to where they are directed to go to, which is again another piece of data that I think is going to really highlight the need to pay for those meals up front, as opposed to waiting until there's debt at the end of the year. Um, So yeah, we're excited to support this once again. The other piece that I will highlight, it's a little bit on the periphery of school meals, but it is a very important policy piece. Again, getting a little bit in the weeds, but there is a hold harmless provision for CEP schools with the way that they collect their data. There was a hold harmless provision put in place in 2015 that allows them to continue using their free and reduced price meal numbers from before they opted into CEP, and use that to continue uh, applying for and getting education funding allocated to schools within CEP schools and CEP districts. Because that hold harmless provision is expiring this year, and we're also seeing a decrease in numbers with direct certification with SNAP and Medicaid, I think there's a lot of concern around how schools are going to maintain their funding levels. Within the education, state education funding specifically, which then again is going to, I think, really start potentially forcing schools to have really tough conversations around if CEP makes sense when they're going to potentially lose massive amounts of education funding with the switch from farms forms to direct certification. So we are very closely following that conversation and supporting conversations that the Blueprint Coalition and our education partners are having around how to kind of like backfill that loss of data and change some of the formulas around state education funding to potentially kind of like bolster it with different data sources and make sure that schools are not losing that data. Um, there may end up being another hold harmless provision in the meantime while they, figure out the best formulas to ensure that schools are getting the adequate funding that they need. But just putting that out there is something else that we are very concerned about and definitely supporting a, full-fledged conversation and potentially more sustainable long-term solution as we look towards federal programs not necessarily being as stable of a data source as they used to be. Um, so yeah, that's I know a little bit more kind of in the weeds and wonky and not as upfront in terms of how it's impacting students and schools, but happy to take questions and try to clarify if there are any
Yeah.
questions about either of those things.
No, thanks, Julia. I mean, I think it's important to understand that, an attack on our safety net program has all of these trickle down effects and impacts and, winds up in a place where we just can't feed our kids in school as a result. Any questions for Julia or LaMonika? I saw what you put in the chat, LaMonika, so thanks for that. Yeah, Tom, you're on mute, Tom.
Sorry, I turned off my video. Um, I am so supportive of the idea of free lunch and breakfast and lunch in the low-income areas in Montgomery County. But I worry about the idea that all students across the county would receive free, or across the country, would receive free breakfast and lunch. And it's partly because of how deeply I've been able to examine what the schools are serving and what the schools are procuring, which overwhelmingly is French fries and frozen pizzas, et cetera, et cetera. And I know a lot of kids are eating that at home, so it may be comfortable food for the kids. But somehow we've got to shift this whole population to eating more fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's not what the schools are procuring, generally speaking. When they get apples, they get them from Michigan. They're pre-sliced, they're pre-packaged in single serving units, and they're treated with a chemical to prevent them from browning. And I just don't think that's the direction we should be going with regard to the food choices that are being presented to our children across the county. I went to school with the peanut butter and jelly and, sandwiches I made at home. And actually, that was so much healthier than what I believe the schools are serving to kids now. which is industrial food, processed food. It doesn't arrive even at the turkey thicket as a whole food product. It arrives there as a processed industrial food product. So, people are going to get tired of hearing from me on this because I grow vegetables and I like for the vegetables to be able to elbow their way into the program somehow. It's not possible yet. So that's enough said about that. But that's just a concern that comes when you think about our universally providing all kids with breakfast and lunch provided by the school, because at this point, I don't really trust the school to get it right in terms of childhood nutrition.
Thanks for those thoughts, Tom. Appreciate you. Any other questions for Maryland Hunger Solutions? I want to be sure to give AK a minute to come off mute and speak a little bit about the Food Justice Coalition. I know we've spoken about it in the past here, and also to plug MANA's event that's coming up for MLK Day.
Thanks, Allison. So I'm gonna keep it. Oh, is there a question for MD Hunger Solutions?
I think Liz may want to react to Tom's comments. So why don't you go ahead, Liz?
Thanks. And whoever said Happy Wellness Wednesday earlier, I really appreciate it. I actually took the majority of this call walking, getting some fresh air. So I actually just got back into my office and appreciate all of the comments around school meals from both the delegate at the beginning and LaMonika and Julia, just so much related to our work. So I really appreciate that. And Tom, it's been a while. We haven't connected, you and I. And so I'd welcome you to join us out in a school or at our central production facility. It's been a couple years since you've seen what we've been doing, and I'm happy to report we have plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables and produce for our students every single day in our schools. So they are being served whole apples from right down the road in what's our farm we're working with? They're I'm forgetting the name at the moment, but
Linda Lewis Orchard, I'm sure. It'd be Lewis Orchard, probably.
no, it's not.
Bulgars in Westminster?
I
Bulgars
think
Orchard?
winter break stole my brain, guys. I can't remember.
It's okay.
We're working with. District Farms is where we're getting some of our hydroponic leafy greens that are now on the menu every single week. And Moon Valley Farms is where we're getting our whole apples, and they're helping us aggregate from other farms around the area as well. And so we have fresh produce coming in. It is a priority for us. There is definitely opportunity to grow here as well, acknowledging that, right? There's always opportunity to grow. But we're in the same business of wanting to serve food to serve kids the highest quality and nutritious foods. And I know that some of the studies that I've read personally really show that students that are eating not just breakfast and lunch, but breakfast and lunch from the school breakfast program and the National School Lunch Program are really seeing positive impacts on their behavior in school, their academics in school. And so while we may serve pizza every Friday because it is one of those kid favorites and they love it, what they don't know is that it's whole grain pizza and it's low sodium pizza. And instead of going to maybe the bodega on the corner or, the local pizza shop that may have much higher sodium and things like that, they're getting it, they're able to enjoy it. And we're not criminalizing any certain food. We're saying, great, enjoy this, but enjoy it in a way that's going to be good for you. So just sharing a little bit about what we're doing here at MCPS and acknowledging there's always opportunities to improve, but we are proud of what we're serving to our students as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Liz. And Emery noted in the chat that the new federal dietary guidelines were released today, so I haven't had a moment to look at those yet.
Neither have I.
I know, right? We'll have to wait. We have a second to actually digest that. That should be interesting. But yeah, thank you, Liz and Tom, for that conversation. That could obviously be a whole other meeting, which we'll host at some point in the future. But just pivoting back to AK for a moment.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, so I'll keep this very quick. We have two events coming up. The first one is next week. It's in honor of MLK Day. We are hosting it on January 15th. It's shortish, and we are providing lunch and free parking. We are doing this in a roundtable discussion format, so really about knowledge exchange, collaborative ideas, innovation, and we really encourage you all to attend, to share it with your networks and communities. We would love to have you there. We're hosting it at Montgomery College's Rockville campus, so they are a hunger-free campus grant recipient this year, if I'm not wrong. And we will have a student wellness leader also sharing some reflections about fighting hunger on campus. So would love to have everyone there. And then the second thing is our Food Justice Coalition's next meeting, which is at the end of January. Both of the flyers have been shared in the chat. They have links and QR codes for RSVPing. And you can always email me if you have any questions. I'll put my email in the chat as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you for everyone for being here today. I know we're a minute over time, so thank you for your time. Thank you to Delegate Charkoudian. Thank you to Maryland Hunger Solutions. Appreciate you all. It is a sunny and warm outside right now, so everybody go get some Wednesday wellness and step outside and enjoy it. And take care.